Kingston has been Ontario's penitentiary city for nearly 2 centuries. Kingston Penitentiary opened its doors on June 1, 1835. Then called Provincial Penitentiary of the Province of Upper Canada, it was one of the oldest prisons in continuous use in the world at the time of its closure. Kingston Penitentiary was one of 9 prisons in the Kingston area, which range from low security facilities to the maximum security facilities, Kingston Penitentiary and Millhaven Institution. The architect was William Coverdale, the same man who would later design the Rockwood Asylum. The cells originally measured 29 inches wide by 8 feet deep and 6 foot, 7 inches high. In 1845, the towers, stock walls, and the North Gate House was completed. In 1859 to 1861, a dome was added connecting 4 cell blocks. 6 inmates were accepted when the penitentiary was opened. 5 were from Toronto. When the first 5 convicts arrived from Toronto in 1835 to serve their time on May 27th, the prison wasn't yet open, and they had to serve some time confined in the county jail for 5 days. 5 months later, there were 62 inmates, including women. The yard was first boarded by only a plank fence. Later, it was changed to cement and chain fencing so inmates didn't feel like it was easy to escape. On October 22, 1836, the inspectors of the penitentiary had published rules for the inmates to follow. Some of the rules were: 1. Inmates must not exchange a word with one another under any pretense whatsoever. 2. Inmates must not exchange looks, winks, laughs, nods, or gestures to each other. 3. When the bell rings for mess hall, inmates are to continue out of their cells in regular order and march with faces inclined in one direction. 4. Inmates are to yield perfect obedience and submission to their keepers. Over them always hung the threat for the willful violation of any of these duties. Corporal punishment would be instantly inflicted. These were no idle threat. Even children in the prison got punished. One of the youngest inmates was Peter Charbonneau. He was committed on May 4, 1845 for 7 years when he was only 10 years old. Peter got punished for acting like a child in the prison and staring, winking, and laughing. Peter was publicly lashed 57 times in 8½ months in front of the rest of the prisoners. Alec Lafleur, an 11-year-old French-Canadian boy, on Christmas Eve 1844 was given 12 strokes of the rawhide for talking French. Anton Boucher, aged 8, was listed as receiving corporal punishment with the Cat O' Tails during their time in prison. Anton has the distinction of being the youngest child ever incarcerated at the penitentiary. He was serving 3 years along with his brothers, aged 12 and 19, and another friend, aged 12. In 1845, the gang had been convicted of picking pockets on a steamboat on the St. Lawrence River outside of Montreal. Girls were also prisoners. 14-year-old Sarah Jane Pierce was another child convict who served 7 years in the penitentiary. She was convicted of break-and-enter and theft in Brockville in 1878. Women would be flogged. Sarah was flogged 7 times in 3 months. English author Charles Dickens visited Kingston in 1842 and commented in his American Notes, "There is an admirable jail here, well and wisely governed and excellently regulated in every respect. The men were employed as shoemakers, rope makers, blacksmiths, tailors, carpenters, and stonecutters in the building in a new prison, which was pretty far advanced towards completion. The female prisoners were occupied in needlework. When the famous author showed up, all punishments were placed on hold to show the best side. By 1850, there were 410 inmates, including 24 women and girls. Women were incarcerated there during the prison's first century. It didn't become known as Kingston Penitentiary, or KP, until after Confederation in 1867. Escapes from Kingston Penitentiary were far and few between. Two of the most famous escapes involved going over the wall with a ladder. In 1923, a man who is called Canada's most notorious bank robber, Red Ryan, led 4 inmates over the wall after first setting fire to a shed as a distraction. Bank robber Tyrone William Conn, who had already escaped 3 other prisons, got over Kingston Penitentiary's 10-meter perimeter fence one night in 1999 by using a handmade ladder and grappling hook he constructed in the prison shop. He made a dummy out of clothing stuffed with paper. His escape was not discovered until the next morning. There were at least 3 big riots at Kingston Penitentiary, 1932, 1954, and 1971. The first riot lasted 6 days. The reason was because of a cigarette problem. The riot ended without casualties. 2 decades would pass before next major disturbance. August 15, 1954, inmates were getting ready for a Sunday baseball game in the exercise yard when a group of them charged at the prison guards and used cigarette lighters to set buildings on fire. It lasted only 2 hours. One guard was held hostage in the blacksmith shop, managed to escape by dressing in prisoner's garb and mingling with the inmates. Again, there were no casualties. In 1971, a riot lasted 4 days, with 6 guards being held captive. Much of the central block was destroyed, including the interior of the central dome. It was the most brutal, by far, of the 3 riots. On the final night, 14 prisoners considered undesirables, mostly sex offenders, were tied to chairs in the center of the dome and beaten with metal bars. Mock charges were read for each man. In the end, only 2 prisoners died and all 6 guards escaped unharmed. The penitentiary's western wall adjoins the Portsmouth Olympic Harbor, which hosted the sailing events for the 1976 Summer Olympics. Across the road to the north is the now closed Kingston Prison for Women, which functioned from January 24, 1934, to take female prisoners who had been in segregated quarters of the main facility. Kingston Penitentiary has been a place most of Canada's notorious inmates served time. That list included Paul Bernardo, Michelle Briere, Russell Williams, Mohammed Shafia and his son, Clifford Olson, and Michael Rafferty. In April 2012, the Government of Canada announced that Kingston Penitentiary would close due to its aging infrastructure, making the prison not viable anymore. Many movies have been filmed here over the years, such as Carry On Sergeant, A Warehouse for Bodies, Blues Brothers 2000, Vendetta, Murdoch Mysteries, Star Trek Discovery, Alias Grace, Titans, Mayor of Kingstown, and now Reacher. Eager visitors now line up to get a view of the historic Kingston Penitentiary through its open doors to the general public. Though it's been closed as a prison, tour guides still see and feel things while doing their walkarounds. People have reported feeling cold in strange places and having powerful feelings of not being welcomed. One tour guide reported hearing keys jingling behind her coming from an empty cell. When she turned, there was a shadow of a man standing behind her, blocking the entranceway. The shadow walked down the hall closer to the guide, spinning the keys in his hand. Other guides have said that it's just the spirit of William Wentworth. William Wentworth was the very last staff member to die at Kingston Penitentiary. In November 1961, during his midnight shift, he was stabbed to death on the 3rd floor washroom of Dorm C. His murderer still has yet to be caught and remains a mystery to this day. The prison now lays quiet. No more bar slamming, no more yelling from the inmates, and no more torture.